are running a little bit. We're running a little bit behind because of the little ceremony shindig, but I think we're going to be starting soon. Thanks.
Okay. Can you do that on the fly? Yeah.
Give me a second to sit down and then I'll
Okay.
Thanks.
You gotta keep the noise down, okay?
Welcome to stay.
Okay, I'm ready, Joel.
All right. And then on that account, we can call the meeting to order. Are there additions or deletions to the agenda?
I assume there will be an update on the music concert.
Well, there's an item on there. Well, let's see whether or not Angela shows up.
We were hoping he'd come.
Yeah. Those are the floor. There's questions, but if we don't get to it before then, it's on the business with the consider posting. We could talk about it in that context. 9.2. Anything
I don't have
else?
much, there's no changes on the noise, if you want to take that one off. Or I can say it when needed.
Yeah, the same with the short-term rentals. We'll have to wait and
Right.
Greg with those.
Let's see. I think you might be on.
My, yes.
Oh, it is on. We don't know what to do. Okay, well, go to the floor. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board? Oh, gee, Ted, I'm surprised.
Unmuted. We're all ready to go. Welcome to Paul down in my lower left. Okay, there we go. Welcome to Paul. Reading down the agenda, I'd like to express pleasure at seeing the letter about speed reduction requests. And if I remember correctly from past history, I think the town board was basically submitting them in batches. And now that this batch is there, I'm curious, what is there a batch processing, or what will be the next batch that will be happening? Second, highlights of the engineering report. I really hope that a online copy of that report will be available to the public. I asked about this a couple weeks ago, hasn't showed up yet. General fund, where is the next one? Oh, yes, it was already, Pat already mentioned a bit about the music concert. And yes, I would be very interested to hear what progress has been made with that, what was considered that the town might have an interest in besides no parking. And I'm sure you'll go into that. And with that said, just like to put in a little advertisement. The summer market is happening again on Friday at the Sue Beaner's Pavilion. And hopefully there will be food, produce there, and crafts and goods. And there we are, let's see. And at least one guy will be having both food and photographs and cards at the same time, which is me. And if you look at my profile, I think you will see it. So with that, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. The correspondence magically appeared this afternoon, so I didn't get a chance to review it. It was linked to me,
It was the filing of the laws,
There's this filing, yeah,
yeah,
but thank you, we got it, letters basically.
yeah.
yeah.
What was the DO2 one about the speed limit reduction?
Speed reductions was Troy, 45 mile an hour between Nelson and Miller, and 30 miles per hour in all the, in the three developments
Mhm.
on off of 96B.
Yeah,
So
well, that's good.
that's headed in the right direction.
Progress. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there is a list. I can't remember what the next batch is, and the state is still insisting that we send them in small batches.
Mhm.
So until we're able to do otherwise, we do have a list of, roads where people have asked to have the limit reduced.
Are there any roads?
Miller is a big one. Yeah, no, actually, a lot of roads, but there are some that, the ones that are especially the, speeding, people getting to work. Miller Road has been a big problem. I forget what else besides Miller is on that next list, but, I'll look it up and bring it next time.
Yeah, now that we've gotten one.
Yeah,
batch through, we can-
it's only taken 2 years.
Yeah, we can throw another batch.
Yeah.
We have to wait for them to finish one batch before.
But it was, they got thrown off by COVID and,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
so they said, anyway.
Do you want to say something?
About speeding.
Is it possible to move the 55 mile an hour change past the last house in the hamlet? Because it's just turning into my driveway, I have people like racing me off the road.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering is that could that be part of the consideration to talk to the state, and how so would I help go about doing that?
That could, I know one of the things that reminded me that one of the things that was on the next list was when they lowered the speed limit through town to 40, they put it on this side of the Miller Road intersection instead of the other side. So we could maybe couple the two ends.
Oh,
So,
that'd be great.
yeah.
Thank you.
And once we send it in, it's only 2 or 3 years before we hear it.
No, it's usually a little less than a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll be caught up.
Okay. Any announcements? That you're aware of? Anybody wants to make? I already had one from Ted.
I don't know whether announcement fits, but to welcome Paul.
Welcome you guys to.
It's just nice to have a full board again.
Yeah, yeah. We'll try and be nice.
Yes. And we have the unusual pleasure of having our legislative representative, Dan Klein, with us in person this evening. Update us on all the great stuff happening at the county level.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. It is good to be back. I have not been in the building since the beginning of COVID. So,
Really?
Oh, wow.
You're gonna just,
it was the welcoming and farewell party for your planners that brought me out food. Note to self. And I go in person to that. Yes. Yes. Throughout the entire pandemic, actually. And also I wanted to welcome Paul to this strange little club that we all like. Get your membership card. So yes, I did have a few items to report from the county legislature. One is that we just got our second quarter sales tax report, and it's pretty good overall for the county. For this year, we are up 3.5% in sales tax revenue from the previous year. And there's a whole formula that happens about how it gets divided out. And so it turns out, in this particular case, at this moment at least, the towns will be getting are up 5% from last year. So you're actually up more than the county as a whole.
Except that we don't use it.
But the residents use it.
Yeah.
It's taken off the residents'
Yeah.
property tax.
County tax.
Yeah, county tax. So,
Yeah.
so it's good for Dan.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I want to report about is just, I have sent some emails along the way, and there's not a whole lot of news, but just want to mention about the broadband rollout that we're working on, the broadband project. So the county is putting together a request for proposals, and we're hoping to send it out either this month or maybe a little bit into September, hard to say.
It hasn't gone out.
It hasn't gone out yet, but it's close. And it is going to go out to all the broadband internet providers in the counties, about 15 of them, I think. And it's basically asking them, what will it take to get internet, high-speed internet to every house in Tompkins County? So I'm optimistic that it's going to work. Go ahead. Nick.
Money wise.
Yes.
That's gonna take,
Mainly,
okay, is there federal money? Because I know that they talk about that.
Right. So yeah, let me just say a little more, and I will definitely get that answered. And if there's more that you want to ask, feel free. So first of all, it's going to be broken down by town. So somebody's going to bid on the town of Danby. And what's that?
By town.
By town. And you may know this, that Danby has some of the most unserved addresses in the whole county, right? The whole southern part of the county is the worst, the least covered. And so we'll get hopefully get one or more than one company that's going to say, okay, in order for us to do this is how we would do it, and it will cost us such and such dollars. And so then we will pick the one that, you know, it makes the most sense, both in terms of money and technical. And then we're going to go looking for the money, we the county. So we expect in the end, it'll be a combination of grants, because there is a huge, like literally $1 billion of money for broadband projects. And then also the internet service provider themselves will chip in some money, because they're going to end up making a profit out of it in the long run. So they will chip in. And then the county will probably chip in as well. And that's what I imagine will happen. Yes, go ahead.
I know this stuff from way back when they
Sure.
were refusing to do anything. And what's the breakdown in terms of that? Like, is the county gonna pay? We're not paying anything, is that correct?
The town will probably not pay anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So percentage wise, county, you don't know.
We don't know yet.
No, here's how it'll work. So I'm just making these numbers up. Somebody bids and they're the winning bid, and they say, we can do it for $1 million. We can provide internet to everybody in Danby. So then we go looking for grants, and suppose we find 700,000. We're like, okay, we have 300,000 more to make up. Broadband company, how much are you willing to put in? And then the county will probably take care of the rest. That's what I imagine will happen.
Okay.
So we've got multiple providers. There's Hafley, and there's Point Broadband, and there's Spectrum.
Yep.
You know, they and Hafley, right?
Yes.
And they'll all be saying each of them will be saying for the town of Danby, but not just for their area,
The whole town.
the whole town. So that means they're stringing. You're talking about extending existing service, right? So, you know, part of it's served by cable, part of it's served by fiber optic, fiber. So if Hafley says, well, we could do it for X, are they talking about running cable for Spectrum, where they're extending Spectrum lines? Or are they going to run fiber optic and some sort of interconnect to connect to the cable? Or what?
They wouldn't interconnect, if I understand your question correctly. They would just find a way to get to all the currently unserved homes.
But would they run cable if it was going to be connected to Spectrum, or?
If Spectrum is bidding on it, then they will extend their cable.
Yeah, but consider that if Spectrum were to bid on the whole thing, there's parts of the town where the closest provider is not going to be Spectrum, it's going to be.
Right. That's why each bid is going to look different, and they're going to have to decide for themselves if they're willing to do that, how much it would cost them to do that.
It sounds like the RFP is the first step. It has to go out and they've got to look at it, and then they're supposed to investigate and bid and blah, blah, blah
So
before.
it's money and quality.
Correct.
But it's not gonna be an option of, say, Faithfully doing the southern end and Clarity doing,
Who
the
knows?
other end.
I can't say that under no circumstances will that will happen, but that's not we're trying to do something different.
Yeah, because it's really obvious that's, this is Avery is down south.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
so it would make sense if they would move.
You continue
and
providing
there
that
it is.
area.
Yeah,
So I can imagine that under special circumstances, that would turn out, for whatever reasons, to be the right thing, but that's not where we're starting, at
right,
least.
right.
And then the last part of this I just want to report about is that the Tompkins County Council of Governments had asked the county to look at another option, and Joel was a big part of this, which was what would it look like to have a countywide, municipally owned, municipally operated internet system. And we did go ahead and look at what that is, and the cost of that, the estimated cost is $100 million, whereas the cost of this other system is $7 million. And there's some other things that go along with what 100 million means, but the chances of anyone, pursuing that are quite low, just to be honest.
Well, it's a big number in terms of the investment, but it is revenue producing.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so again, there's a lot of parts to this, but one thing you have to consider is that would put the county in the internet business.
Yeah.
And then you have to start buying trucks and
Service.
employees and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really, so it's not just the upfront money, which is formidable already.
Yeah. And as an operating, you have to create a whole new operating.
Yeah, which is, I'm just being honest with you, I think there's like no interest among legislators about pursuing that.
Understood.
So that's my report.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Expediency is the name of this game. And expediency and whatever can happen that will supply internet to people is what we need.
I mean, that's a big, thank you. I pretty much agree with that. It's like,
That is the driver, is, how do we get service to those who don't have it?
right, and this is the quickest, cheapest way to do it. It's not necessarily the best. There's other reasons why, it's private and all that stuff,
Yeah, it
but
doesn't address the quality issue.
it doesn't address competition issue. There's a lot of things it doesn't quite get at, but it does get at quickness.
Meaning, how long? Really 5 years out there?
3 to 5.
Wow,
That's the estimate.
Yeah,
that's pretty incredible.
That seems quick to you or a long time?
I have history. Meaning,
Okay.
I mean, we
it's
were,
how hard it is to get it
Yeah.
anywhere.
yeah,
They had to slowly get to
Yeah.
Number Road, which is amazing.
Well, these last places that are left unserved are the least profitable. Otherwise, somebody would have
Yeah.
done it already. So this is the only way we're going to do
Well,
it.
that's,
right. It has been for forever. Jed, you had a comment?
Actually, it's a question for Dan, whether he knows or a comment to pass back. In the request for proposals, are you including the requirement that the installer will cover the drop to the house? Danby is not unique, but it sure has a lot of people who are a long way off the road, and that can be a very substantial cost if it has to be installed by a commercial Spectrum, for example, likes thousands of dollars to do what could be done for a few $100s. So do you know if that's in, or could it be put in? And Paul and anybody else, please speak to the microphones. We're not hearing you through them.
I'm gonna try to just, so.
If you're
Everybody who
right-
owns a long driveway, which I'm one of them, is that there's either an intermediate pole or there is not, but that pole you either own or don't own. And everything going up to that pole would be public, everything on that pole would be private. That seems like that's pretty much a no-brainer.
That by comparison to cable TV has this fixed radius beyond the pole that they will go with no charge. And that should be the minimum sort of requirement. But in fact, once they've gone the first 500 feet, I mean, you know very well all the long driveways, Paul. It would really be a burden to ask people to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to go the last 100 feet.
So the RFP, as I understand it, is gonna, first of all, it definitely covers the road, right? There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And then as part of the RFP, we're asking, what is your charge to go down the driveway? So that's something we will evaluate as part of the whole process. So we're not requiring anything, but we're accept that they provide that information. So, and as you, I think you said this, right? A typical thing is that the first whatever number of feet are free and then they charge after that. But at least we'll know ahead of time what that charge would be.
That's good
That's,
to
and
know.
that's typical for a lot of people who have had hookups. I mean, I know on my road, you know, there was a flat fee for hookup, and after a certain number of feet, if you lived way off the road, you paid per foot extra. And nobody balked at that. I mean, so, I mean, it was worth it still.
Sure. Just to comment, you know, that clarity is pretty reasonable about that sort of thing. With Spectrum
Sometimes-
not inquired about it, it was all or nothing. Either they install the whole thing or nothing. And they're not doing reasonable fees.
By the way, there's one other little important information about this you should know is that we're only taking bids for fiber or cable.
Yeah, good.
No more radio, no satellite,
And we're
just
talking,
fiber.
we're talking about,
no towers,
wired connections.
wired connections. Yeah.
Telephone poles.
So everyone's gonna have good, good quality at least, or the,
Good.
reasonable quality.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's exciting.
Even those of us who already have cable, it's variable quality.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
But at least it's not dependent on the weather.
Right, yeah, or line of sight.
Yeah.
Great,
All right,
Okay,
yeah.
well, thanks, everybody.
thanks.
And he's got this. I don't think he had anything specifically for us. And we will come to the hunt, and when Tim shows up. Is there a question for you?
Okay, no, we're expecting Hunt to show up.
Yeah, he said he'd get here in 6:45.
Okay, all right. So 6:03, we're holding out.
Mhm. Was there a court report?
No, well, I don't know if there's,
No, I didn't. I wasn't able to link it, so probably just best to wait until next time.
Next time?
And to that, I also wasn't able to link the two things you had requested, Joel, which included the engineering report, which Ted, that will go up and will be made available. So my apologies for not getting to it today.
Then the work drive over.
wasn't there 3:00.
Yep.
It was there,
What was
but
that?
it wasn't there, it was there earlier today, but not before
When?
that.
I put it up last night.
What are we talking about?
What are you talking
The
about?
engineering report. It's in work drive, it's not linked to the agenda.
Right, I went into work drive, there were two things in there. Like, did you do
Agenda
that? And,
and the.
That was the report.
The preliminary engineering report.
The second thing was the
oh, it's
report.
not. Okay,
That's the second.
I'll
thing
look
it said.
again, I didn't see that, that's not what I saw.
It wasn't there a long time ago. It was very short and it's 250 pages.
Yeah, but it's only,
No,
what, 50 pages of text,
65.
65.
And
Only
there's more
65.
text in the appendices. There's text in it as well.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of appendices and
So did you see it?
I saw it. I read pieces of the beginning. I didn't
Okay.
have a chance to read the whole thing.
Okay.
And I didn't have a chance to read through the appendices and I
Okay.
didn't print everything out
okay.
right away.
Okay.
It's a formidable document.
I
So we'll
would
get
like to have seen
we'll
it.
get a drive-through overview of it
Hey, no, that's not me.
in a bit.
Okay,
I'm really curious about this. So you're trying to do a sanitation, for this hamlet right here, and the one in South Danby,
West-
West End.
West Danby.
or, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
not South Danby,
West.
West End.
over the hill.
Over the hill.
Yeah.
Um,
If you don't,
So
they're not gonna hear
where's the
you,
report now?
Paul, they're not gonna hear you unless you speak to the mic.
Where is the report?
It's, if you go into work drive,
But
I'll
did
tell you what.
Get your email address yet?
No.
Paul has not gotten his email yet. Paul, is your microphone actually on though? Is the little toggle on?
There's a switch on the mic.
Up is on.
Am I on?
Oh, that's so much better. Yes. Yes.
On.
Yeah, so yeah, Paul, you don't have access to the work drive yet. We are coordinating with the IT provider and we should get you set up by the end of the week. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Terrific.
Yeah, when you have a town email, you will have access to work drive, which is basically the repository of information.
and sometimes you can find them, sometimes not.
Sometimes you
Right.
find it,
Okay.
sometimes-
I looked in the meeting.
That's, it was just there very shortly.
Yeah, I mean, I put, like I said, I moved it to the meeting folder last night.
Is it a public document?
It is now,
Okay, so anybody who wants to read it can read it.
right?
And all you have to do is
It will
come.
be linked to, I actually had to link it to the agenda, but it didn't happen yet. But normally, the agenda, which is posted on the website, has the links associated with it, with the action items on the agenda. So if you click on the link, it takes you to the document, which is in work drive, but public doesn't have access to work drive except through those links.
Great.
I will say one of the issues with the file, it was that it was a zip file and it was, so Leslie, that might be why you didn't recognize it, because when I went into work drive, it was a zip file. I had to unzip it and then it gave me some errors. So that's why it didn't actually get up, but I have it now and I will go ahead and link it to the agenda and it will also be linked in the minutes. So either way, you should be able to see it in the next few minutes from the agenda for those at home, for those going home, for those who want to read it tomorrow, it'll be there.
Oh, I've been trying to get around to reading it for weeks. It's a lot to digest. Okay. Do we have any action items on the meeting minutes?
No,
No,
nothing's on the agenda, so.
we didn't put it on, but
There were some questions on the general fund.
whether,
Yeah,
okay, well, why don't we do that now? So now,
the general fund, the question had to do with A258, which says on the abstract says CSA Employee Benefit Fund, but it's for $115.19, which is not the Employee Benefit Fund, and
Not
the
likely.
detail says dental insurance. But then there is no CSE amount on there, and there should be.
Okay, wait, yeah, sorry, that 115 is definitely an error on the abstract. Let me go to the which voucher, 258. Second, 258.
Yeah. So it should be $575.95.
Yeah, sorry, okay, correct.
So
So
is
I
that the
will,
only- is that
575.
the only issue with the general?
The other issue had to do with the wireless. It lists the zoning, and on the actual bill, it didn't have anything for zoning, but it did have planning, and then it had 5 for highways, so. Don't know why
No, there is, so Steve has a phone. I don't know why it's zoning either, because I think that should actually be code, but I think in the budget it's zoning, so. Sorry, did somebody say something?
But on the actual bill, it doesn't have it on there. The actual bill has all of the other ones outside planning cell are all, Shawley.
What?
All 5.
Oh, no, but it goes by the phone number.
274.
It's listed in his
74?
name.
say again,
So hang on, let me pull up the bill. There it is. So Yeah, they're all listed under Shawley's name, but the phone number, if you look at the phone number, that's how you can tell which one goes to the planner and which one goes to the code enforcement officer. And that's why. So only the planner's phone number actually has the planner listed. I'm not sure why the code does not show up on the line charges, but the same reason that Jack doesn't have 5 phones. So yeah, there is, it's generally the first one, I think, if you look at the, it's the 220-8834 number, which is it's generally the first one in the table on the 3rd page. And you can tell also that it is for the code because it now has a hotspot involved. So that's why it's $45.38 as opposed to a regular phone, which is without a hotspot is $40.38. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It gets around.
Yeah.
You could just shut the fans off.
So with that change in the dental insurance line, it brings the total up to $27,652.19.
$27,612.19.
652.19. So 27,652.19 is
Yeah,
the
612. Yeah, that's what I have. I want to move the general fund 251 to 274
It's those 2 rear stacks. It's to the left of the door.
for $27,612.19.
Your left.
But sorry, Leslie, why are you getting 40? I have 52 and not 12. Where did you take off $40 somewhere?
I can't hear what you're saying.
I can't.
Just slow down.
Yes.
Okay. When I upped the dental line from 115 to 575, it brought the total up to 27,652.
The 115.19.
That's
And
what
you
was
raised
on.
And it should have been 575.95.
Correct.
I came up with $27,612.19. What did you come up with?
I came up with $652.19.
Where's the difference?
Okay. I subtracted 155.19 and then added 575.95.
Was that other number didn't belong to any other vouchers?
No, 5.19. What is it? Um, 575. Yeah, I mean, my spreadsheet is summing automatically, so I didn't.
We can just find out the difference. It might make it, might be obvious.
Well, I didn't want to do, it was 27,191, 43
Mhm.
minus the 155.19
Plus,
plus 575. I hope I didn't make a mistake.
Plus 27.
you come up with the same.
27,612.19 is what I get.
Yeah, I did 575.95 minus 115.19 is a difference of $460.76. That's missing from the total. So the total that was on the agenda was $27,191.43. And so when I add that 27,191.
Yeah, but you have to subtract the 1 from that total.
Right.
I did, yeah. So 27,191 plus 575.95 minus the 115.19, or if you just do 27,191.43 plus 460.76.
You should come up with the number that, you should come up with the same number that Leslie did, because that's what she did. So,
No, I'm coming up with $27,652.19.
I'm gonna do it one more time.
I thought Janice's way, she could come up with the same number.
27,191. I mean, I could have made a mistake.
27,191.43 minus
115. I'm even put in the decimal point equals that plus 575. Janice is right. 652.19. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Janet.
I remove
Okay.
the first movement. I'm gonna move the general fund vouchers 251 to 274 for $27,652.19.
Perfect. Thank you.
Second,
Second by Pat. Ready for a vote?
Wait, what's more? Okay. Ready for a vote. Okay, Connors, Hanson,
I think I should abstain
Why?
because I haven't been, I need to be part of this process before I
yeah,
vote.
that's
Okay,
fair.
I'll look at it.
Fair
I
enough.
don't have an email even.
Hunter,
Yes,
Woodworth,
Yes,
and Gagnon.
Yes. Do we have a highway one?
Yes, yeah.
Because it wasn't on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't link the highway.
Laura gave us all the stuff last night.
Yeah, it will be linked in the minutes.
So, could you fill in the blanks for us, for vouchers, whatever it was for how much?
Yes.
Highway, yeah.
161 to 178.
For $33,464.23.
Again, 30 what?
33.
For $33,464.23.
Is this right? No.
Was that a motion?
Yes.
Okay. So Leslie moved,
Second,
and Pat seconded.
So Connors,
Yes.
Hanson,
Abstain.
Hunter,
yes.
Woodworth,
yes,
Gagnon.
Yes.
I'll move the water fund vouchers 22 through 27 for $10,009.71.
second,
Bunch this time.
Oh, that was a second from Pat.
yep,
Yep. What's that?
Ready?
Okay.
Connors,
Yes.
Hanson,
Abstain.
Hunter,
Yes,
Woodworth,
yes,
and Gagnon.
Yes. Did you want to revisit?
Not right now.
revisit it.
Or when she did it again, she got it.
Coming up with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I did it on my calculator and came up with the amount that's there.
Yeah.
Okay, good. This collaboration? All right,
May I ask one question? Since the general fund had a receipt, a bill for the dental thing, are we supposed to pay it?
for the what?
The 115.19 for dental insurance, there was a bill there. Was the bill already paid or is not due or what?
The bill was for $575.
Right. It was
And-
entered wrong in the voucher. It was only showing one. I think there's like 4 or 5 people who get that, so it should have been multiplied by, I think, 5.
For people.
And that's,
The receipt, what I looked online was the receipt for the dental, not for the other one.
Mhm.
That's fine.
Okay,
well, no, because, yeah, so the rate per person is 115.19, and then Laura always breaks it out based on how many people in town versus how many people on the highway. And that's why it should be 575 because of the 5 people.
My question was, is there a bill for Sunrise Dental, which is what the receipt was online was? Is there a bill for that? Are we
I'm
supposed
not
to pay
sure
it?
what you mean by the receipt.
That's what I saw when I looked through them, so we can check later.
Okay,
wasn't per person receipt.
No, it was not. And it was Sunrise Dental, which is not.
Which is not this year.
No, no.
It makes you wonder whether there's not another bill out there.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah,
yes, mhm.
yeah. It's 3 weeks to the next board meeting.
That's unfortunate for those people.
Mhm. If it's a bill that wants to be.
Yeah, that's correct.
But you don't see where it is, right, Janice?
say again?
There's this bill that was with the vouchers that were from Sunrise Dental.
Uh-huh.
What is that? Because it's not CSCA.
I honestly am not sure what we're talking about. Maybe that's a mistake that got put in on accident.
We'll deal with it later.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, come talk to me because I'm not sure. Was it in with the CSEA file?
It was in with that voucher, yes, and that's what it says on the thing. Dental insurance, and it was listed as Sunrise Dental. Not CSEA. So we should double check that.
Nope.
Okay.
I had, I have on the water district bill, there was a mention of a tree that was potentially causing, maybe going to cause trouble for the tank.
Yes.
Is that getting taken care of?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
sometime like,
That's one of those
Soon.
ashes that we could have
uh-huh,
had sold for timber, but
Uh-huh.
decided not to, and now it's dead and it's
uh-huh.
in danger of falling on the tank. So,
I would donate all my ashes that I'm gonna take down this winter to this town. Or just to you, Joel.
He's got a big yard, just put him anywhere.
Yeah, I'll just drop them
Yeah.
off.
yeah. And they could firewood. And they split easy.
Yeah, okay, so that's something that's being taken care of?
Yeah.
Okay. Like it's gonna get knocked down or,
But it, they were getting bids from different
Okay.
tree companies for just to take it down,
okay,
but they hadn't yet been decided who gets to do it.
okay.
That's being looked into. Usually David gives us I shared with the board, the supporting documentation for this second house in the
Yeah,
rehab program. I didn't know what, if anything, to link to the agenda about that. Nothing got linked. There's this house has been through the approval process and meets all the criteria. It's the next one up for which they got contractor bids and it's good to go. As long as we're okay with it.
I move we authorize rehab of Swift Fox residents with CDBG funds.
I'll second that.
Okay, for an estimated 38,270.
It's an estimate,
An estimate,
we authorize them.
Right. So any discussion? Okay, yes,
Connors,
Yes,
Hanson.
I'm gonna abstain again.
I like your,
I'm for the program, but I don't know anything about it
Yeah,
yet, so.
yeah.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes,
Gagnon,
Yes. Well, here we are at the South Danby Road party consideration. There's been a lot of back and forth with Angelo and last name? And the neighbors and me.
Peters.
And Peters, right, about this party. And the thing that drew our attention to it was that there was this big website and made it, and it's billed as the seventh one of these gatherings. The other previous six were on Agar Road in Trumansburg. And last year drew something on the order of 2,000 people. Where the location where the seventh party is proposed here is on South Danby Road on a 1.6 acre property. It's obvious that you can't contain or hold a party for 2,000 people on 1.6 acres and have any room for anything, not to mention parking and advertising, campsites.
No laughing.
Yeah. There's no provision in our zoning for this kind of commercial activity in that zone. So I contacted him and said, this is not a legal activity. There's no permit associated with it because it's not a permitted use. And if it were a permitted use, then we would have some sort of review and approval process for it, which would address things like crowd control and parking and emergency access and a host of other things. But because it's not a permitted use, there's nothing to be said about it. So he basically agreed to make it into a private party as opposed to commercial activity. And private parties are commonly done around town, and it's been generally regarded as a customary residential activity. Consequently, they're not
2 days long.
well, there might have, family gatherings that last that long.
Family wedding.
Okay, I think
Yes,
it's five, the number of people,
But
Yeah.
it's collecting money,
20 bands.
No, the critical thing is collecting the money.
right? That's not
Selling
Right.
campsites.
that's commercial.
Yeah,
Right.
to me, that went commercial. And our town attorney agreed that looked that way. We have, screenshot of the website. So I talked to, so basically he said, well, I can change it so that the tickets are suggested donation instead of a X amount. What the tickets get him is it gets him control over who attends and an ability to communicate with them. Because when you get your ticket, you submit, you get your email address. You've got email address and telephone numbers for everybody planning on coming. And he told me he was going to limit attendance to, well, it started out 300 or 400, and it ended up more in the 300 end thing. But so that's still a lot of people on 1.6 acres. But what about all those bands? Just their bands and all their stuff would take a lot of room. So we're providing the setup so that they don't have to bring their equipment. There's going to be a house, basically a house sound system for them, so that all they do is show up. The neighbors were all concerned about a party of that magnitude basically being planned to spill onto adjoining property. What he has said, what he agreed to do, and he has done with neighbor cooperation, is to fence his property entirely from the adjoining property, so that there's no longer, you have to jump a fence basically to create a problem for the neighbors. The neighbors are okay with that. They're on board with that part of it.
I heard otherwise, but
Did you?
yeah.
Recently?
Fence
or-
doesn't do anything about noise.
No, it
and
doesn't do anything about
right,
noise.
and it doesn't do anything about parking, all right, no.
No, so that doesn't address the noise issue, but we have no noise law.
Right,
So, I mean, whether you're a private party or a commercial activity, we have no noise law.
You keep saying that. However, anytime there's an issue with your neighbors making too much noise, you call the local police and the police will come and tell the people to quiet down.
You can try that.
You can
That's
try
enough.
that.
And nothing to back it up. There's no law that backs it. I had a meeting with the
It's a
sheriff.
nuisance, so.
I had a meeting with the sheriff. There's nothing to back it.
Something that big may actually.
right.
Well, I think it depends on, you know, there is a state law against creating what was it, disorderly conduct in a public, making excessive noise in a public space, I guess, basically. The question is, what's a public space? Well, the road probably counts.
Right, the road.
Yeah. So, there would be a basis there for them to respond. But
This is gonna create a really big problem for the police.
potentially,
Mhm.
yeah. To me, the biggest risk is the public safety risk of
Right.
having parking on the roads, potentially on both sides, when the shoulder's so narrow that you end up having encroach in the drive lanes in order to park. And then, and people are not gonna be walking in the ditch. They're gonna be walking in the drive lanes. So it's not, the road's narrower. You've got people potentially walking in the drive lane. That would be a public safety hazard.
So can I ask a question?
So he addressed that. What he told me was his plan is, and again, of course, he has all the communication, the ability to communicate with everybody who signed up for this event, is he arranged for parking on Curtis Road and at the parking ride, I can call it, on 96B, and then you're gonna run shuttles to the site, so that there'll be no parking on the road, is what he told.
So Rick Dobson,
Yes, I remember.
I don't is there any documentation about what happened with Rick and how he set his concerts up and what kind of process he went through to get approval to do that right here in the town of Denby?
He ended up not doing it, didn't he? I mean, he
He
proposed.
did it for years.
He did.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, am I the only one old enough to know that he used to do this for years?
I'm old enough to remember him talking about it, but I don't remember him actually doing
I
it.
think it happened. Did it happen?
I never got invited either.
No, but I still think it happened. And it was before my time as a building code
Yes,
person.
yes, definitely. This was
But
a while
It
ago.
was definitely, it might have been in the eighties, but
Yeah.
maybe the nineties, but
I do remember, Gary's got his hand up. Gary, do you remember this?
Which one are we talking about, Joe?
about Dobson's concert, quote unquote, party. Because initially there was a conundrum about like, can he do this? The same, we went through the same deal.
I don't know how the town stopped. How did the town, at one time, the Oasis, they had a stage down there and had bands. How'd they stop that?
Well, that I remember, because I was on the planning board.
And that was a commercial property though.
It was a commercial property, but, and it was a
It was a bar slash.
Yeah, it was a bar and it was
No, it's not.
it was grandfathered
Amplified music.
for the use that it was engaged in,
Correct.
but that was constrained to being what it had been. So when they added the stage, that the
They had to
town,
go through the planning board,
the
right?
town interpreted that as a violation, as an extension of the use that beyond what it had been. And it basically, when we talked about it, agreed they wouldn't do it.
Right.
So let me just, my feeling about this, number one, is that it shouldn't be a dialogue between you.
You
and-
have to speak to the
It
microphone.
shouldn't be a dialogue between you and the private party. They should be going ahead to the planning board.
Yeah.
To having a discussion with the planning board to see whether or not they approve it in any way and what kind of restrictions they want to put on it.
Well, the thing is that it doesn't belong before the planning board because it's not a permitted use. It's a commercial activity.
I thought it would. I mean, my interpretation was that it needed to have a use variance
Yeah, exactly. If you, if.
which would
what
go to
should
the
have happened-
BZA.
What Guy suggested should happen is that you approach the town and
Right.
say, here's what we want to do.
Right,
And then the code officer classifies it and says, this is not a permitted use. If you want to try to get an approval for it, you need a variance. And that would be a use variance and would go to the BZA,
Right.
not to the planning board. If there were a provision in our code, which there is not, for this kind of an event, then there would have been an approval process, which probably would have included site plan review. That would have been a planning board action.
Yeah.
And it would, and the code officer's determination would have sent it to the planning board for review and approval to get a permit for it. But we don't have anything in our code to allow for this kind of a commercial activity, simply not a permitted use.
so it shouldn't be.
And the way zoning is structured is, you know, this, you know, if the use is not specifically permitted, it is specifically prohibited. That's the language of the clause. So
Has
it's not
it-
provided for. Say-
Has
say
anyone
what?
checked with the health department about sanitary
Yeah.
conditions?
Yeah, I checked with the health department as well.
It
The,
shouldn't happen anyway. I mean,
yeah.
it's not-
Great.
the health department told me that you don't need a mass gathering permit for gatherings of less than 5,000 people. That's a
Wow.
state level trigger. The only gathering in Tompkins County that exceeds that trigger is grassroots. So the grassroots does have to get a mass gathering permit, and it's a big deal for the health department. They spend months on it, you know, coordinating it and getting all the stuff that needs to happen with that. So they said, no, that doesn't apply. I asked them about the food, and they said because they're using licensed purveyors, you know, the licenses come with the people who are doing it. You know, basically it's food trucks or is it food trucks? Was that the question?
By the way, I want to, Steve.
Yeah.
You can't leave on this at this
No, he's
point.
talking.
Oh, you gotta talk.
It's gonna talk. Steve's
So he's
gonna
gonna
talk.
speak, he's gonna speak to that question.
Yeah,
It's on, yeah.
So after speaking with you, Joel, about operating permits for the food trucks, I did some research based on what was posted on the website for the event.
Yeah,
There's only one vendor that I feel may have a food trailer, which is also considered a food truck.
yeah.
So they would need an operating permit to vend in this town. The other ones appear to operate out of tents, so that's not a food truck.
Mhm.
The other question that comes up in my mind, one of the vendors listed is a bar from
Mhm.
downtown. Do they have to have a special liquor license to serve liquor off premise at an event? Or
No,
do they,
I mean,
do they,
you kinda
does
like
their
a wedding
license that they have for their brick and mortar cover them
Yeah,
off-site?
I know, you know, caterers do weddings and stuff.
That would be a question should be asked, you're right.
well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I can't get past the fact that there should be a use variance. This sort of
So-
gathering is not,
It's not.
Allowed.
It's not permitted.
Have they approached you at all yet?
No.
no.
They didn't
Okay.
approach the town. We found out about this just before the last.
Residents call.
Mhm.
We
Resident complaint.
we hear about stuff that's illegal.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of like
I hate
somebody
to tell you
saying,
this, but you need to visit them and tell them to stop. Until they go through some process with the town. Only question is what that process might be.
so the other thing I did was I asked the town attorney, what are our options?
Right.
And he said, well, you know, they're rather limited because, you know, it's kind of like, somebody, you know, telling you that they plan on speeding down 96 feet, but until they actually do it, there's no violation.
Correct.
So, I mean, when they hold this party, then, you know, then you can point to it not having been allowed and they went and did it anyway. I didn't wait for that to happen. I approached him and said, you know, you're looking to be in violation here. And he said, let's work it out. You know, I'll try to address the concerns
It's gonna be a problem.
and scale it back, and it'll be a private party and not commercial for that. So that's the Now, if he doesn't do what he said he was going to do, we can always go back and say, and I think, you know, most judges would agree that what was on that website was promoting a commercial event and not a private party. On the other hand, if it goes well and the neighbors have no problem with it, it could be characterized as a private party, which is what I was hoping could happen. And
That's why I keep coming back. I mean, you can talk to the lawyer and find out how to approach him.
well, I did talk,
And then
like I said,
say, look, I'm the
right.
official that's enforced this. I'm letting you know. As you know, you're the supervisor, but that's different than the code
Yeah,
enforcement
it should have been.
officer going to them and telling them this. That if it turns into a, you know, push and shove thing, right now it's not an approved use.
Yeah, so the thing is that we're between enforcement.
But they're,
Because for zoning, the enforcement officer is the planner. And the planner is David, who,
The zoning officer.
but they're trying to dial something back that they already advertised on the online.
That's
That
right.
They accepted money from, then it becomes a commercial event. That use is not permitted. I'm sorry. I mean, I might want to attend, but that doesn't mean it's allowed.
right. Steve is not the code enforcement officer with respect to, he points out, when we define the zoning enforcement is the planner's responsibility. The code enforcement is Steve's responsibility. So there's.
So I would enforce town law for derelict buildings and things like
Right,
that.
right.
But the zoning officer is the zoning enforcement officer as well. So for things like this, it would.
Violation of use would be
Right.
planner.
So the awkward thing is that the plan right in the gap between, you know, when we, between planners.
Greg.
David would have handled this.
Right?
Right.
Party's not till the 26th.
The 26th, right, which is a week from
Yeah.
Friday.
Right.
So I kind of jumped into the breach here because, you know,
Right.
you know, after David and before Greg.
Right.
And ultimately, you know, whether it was David or myself, especially if they proceeded with the event anyway, and then we tried to go shut them down, you know what they're gonna tell.
Right, you can't shut it down after it started. But,
I would think that law enforcement could.
so, you know, something's got to be put on the record that we, I mean, we don't want to, we sit here in a room with microphones and we don't actually do anything physically to beyond that in a lot of ways, you know, so it really, first of all, there has to be a letter of some kind, right? That goes to these people and say, look, you're in violation based on and that's the planner. And so between, unfortunately, if I had the planner here, I'd be saying the exact same thing to them. But have they expressed their opinions about this yet? I mean, I just heard about it tonight, but I obviously know.
Well, David told me, I mean, his opinion, I mean, we could quote unquote shut this
Shut
down
it
if we
down.
want to.
Hey,
We could what?
We could shut it down if we wanted to. So what Guy told us after, you know, the guy, of course, you know, it took, I asked him, what are our options? And he starts out with, well, first of all, I have to decide whether or not it's a land use. Question in my mind, not much question in my mind, but you know, maybe it's not a land use, maybe it's just a customary residential activity. And then
I don't think so.
but then he came around saying, well, it's pretty clear at the scale that's being proposed, that this is a commercial activity and it's not permitted use. So he agrees it's not permitted use.
Right.
What can you do? Well, there's a couple of options. You could try doing a cease and desist. The other one would be a notice of violation or potential violation of the thing. And then if they do it, then you can, you know, so those are a couple of options we could do. We could ask Guy to send them a letter saying, you know, it looks like you're going to be in violation of the, based on what you,
Correct.
what we've seen.
Right.
Uh,
And you need to look for a use variance.
A letter needs to be sent. It needs to be a record because we're setting precedents without doing that. So a letter should be sent saying that they are in violation. It needs to be in writing, not verbal.
yeah. I mean, I've heard from neighbors too and other people, and then I haven't heard one single person say they're happy about this. I don't know whether anybody has.
Well, I spoke with almost all of the contiguous parcels and the neighbors farther away.
Yeah.
And there was general unhappiness. But, that was before there was a negotiation, and then he met with them. And they agreed on the fencing, and he helped out with the fencing. And he put the plan in place for dealing with the traffic concerns. And my impression, well, Dennis Davidow was the sort of point person for the group. And they were okay with what he came up with. They had misgivings, I do too, but they were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. The other thing that they did was they talked to each other about initiating a legal action. The neighbors. And in fact, they went so far as to talk to a lawyer, and they started, when it came down to having to have affidavits, people were actually willing to sign on, nobody was willing to do it.
All this matters little.
Correct.
I think that we as a board need to decide that we need to get Guy to send a letter to say that, cease and desist order, that because it's not an accepted use based on the fact that it's a commercial event. And they haven't gone through any channels that were appropriate.
I totally agree. And what I heard,
Next year, they need to come to the plan, they need to come to the DCA and get.
Well, yeah, we either need to accommodate the
Well, we can
use by
talk about
changing
that.
the law, or they would have to pursue a variance.
Right. Right now, they'd have to pursue a variance. We
What-
can talk about what we want to do with the planning, with, future changing the zoning, adding
Yeah.
permits or
in the-
whatever,
in the
but that we don't have that now.
Yeah.
I would
So-
like to say one thing I've heard is, we know you can't, we don't think you'll do anything. And they don't want to because they're neighbors.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So they've asked us to help them. And if we don't help them, then their answer is, you're right, we don't do anything. And I think the letter is correct.
A minimum needs to be in writing that otherwise we are setting a precedent
Don't
to
you leave
allow
that?
violations without having any recourse. This is a precedent setting,
So the question is only who's going to ask for the letter?
Well, I mean, the board can ask.
Or ask Guy for the letter.
So who's
If
going to
the
make the phone
board
call?
decide to do that,
We can make a motion
Yeah.
to do it.
I know where Guy is.
I asked to come to this meeting
Right.
and speak at the privilege of the floor so that he could both explain what he was doing and answer questions. And he hasn't shown up.
And I don't think that that's the answer anyway.
No.
It's not permitted use, period.
Well, it could be a permitted use if it were a private party.
Right, but
It's not a private party. He's already sold tickets. I could buy a ticket before I came to this meeting. And like 2 hours before the meeting, I could still buy a ticket. He didn't take it down like he said he was going to. It's a business. It's a business. He had it.
Yeah,
Used
well,
to be on Agart Road.
Yes, he tried to
Um,
argue when I first raised the point. He said, well, I'm not making any money. We're just covering the cost of the bands.
doesn't matter.
That's
All these things don't matter.
what it's all, the fact that it's not a profitable business doesn't mean it's not a business.
Correct.
I think I'd like to move that the board, that Joel ask Guy to draft a letter quickly, saying that if this goes forward, it's in violation of Danby's zoning code, and there'll be dire
Has commercial
consequences.
use on the property. Yeah,
I mean,
I would second that motion. Now we can discuss it if you want.
Yeah,
shall we vote?
well, you want to, I mean, I will say that, I did make
I know,
I made a lot of efforts to try.
Yeah.
I know you tried,
Yeah.
absolutely.
you did.
but nothing is in writing, which
That
means,
is correct.
and what you can do, anytime you do personal negotiations without witnesses, there is no guarantee that somebody will just lie and say, oh, you said it was okay. That's why it needs to be in writing.
No.
All right,
No.
I'll come in about 10 minutes.
What's he gonna do? 10 minutes?
He's gonna call in 10 minutes,
Oh,
whoever you was talking to. Yeah, Gary was, you weren't muted, Gary.
who are you gonna call, Gary?
Yeah, to me, if this went forward without him following through, so like I say, my impression talking to the people was that they were willing to go ahead with it and, you know, according to the framework that was basically agreed to. They fenced the property. He said he was going to provide shuttle service of the people, and you would notify the people because he has this mechanism, because you got everybody who signed up, that there would be no parking on the road. They would have to park at the other two sites and get shuttled to it.
Yeah, if he had come to us 6 months ago and could have figured out all this stuff,
It would have been-
it
it would have been
maybe
nice.
would have turned out differently.
Mhm.
But he didn't.
No, it would have
It's
been
got an
fun.
acre and a half, and he's gonna have, 300 tickets. I'm gonna add 100 people who are involved with the bands, and because those people aren't gonna buy tickets. There's, gonna be 500, at least 500 people there, even if he can limit it. But that's all after. The point is, it's not permitted.
Mhm.
It's not permitted, and we can change that, but we can't change it this week.
If I may.
Yeah,
The negotiated fence is well and good. Who's gonna police that?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
If there's alcohol, people are gonna get drunk. The
Mhm.
fence is gonna be on the ground.
mhm. Well,
And,
then
it-
the neighbors have recourse.
the neighbors have the recourse of calling and having someone ticketed for trespassing.
Right.
Right.
And it's on them and they're worried about it.
And as far as parking on the roads, who's gonna police that? Is Keith gonna check the town roads and have any vehicles towed?
Well, that was the other thing, and that's why I got this down here the way it is. One possibility would be to post our town roads, Hill and Tracy.
Why
No
are we
parking.
doing, why are we talking about this?
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't matter anymore. I mean,
I
it doesn't
agree.
matter. I mean, he's got to start with the basic. They have a commercial enterprise. They were selling tickets for use that was never permitted by the town. Period. All the rest is just gobbledygook. So,
But I think the reason we'll talk about it is because no matter what letter gets sent, it's gonna happen.
correct.
Probably.
So
Yeah,
So if,
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the town highway department should post the town roads, no parking from Thursday to Monday. And I think Keith should encourage the county highway department to do the same. Maybe they can't, I don't know.
oh, it's not
That's just
on the road.
my line of thought, because I understand what you're saying.
Yours is practical,
It shouldn't
but
happen.
it still has to be put in that town on record that this is not supposed to be moving forward.
right,
That makes him, the owner of the property,
you have to speak to the microphone.
the owner of the,
Put the microphone this way maybe, so you can look at me and still.
We can hear him.
yeah,
Yeah, sure.
the owner of the property on notice, right?
Yeah.
And then we can think about safety things based on the,
Yeah.
all right,
The letters first.
let us first.
We have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I got no time.
Let's vote.
Okay,
I want to appreciate your attempt to negotiate and to make this a less of a problem than it's going to be. But I keep going back to that it's not an allowed use.
I think
And it's too bad that they didn't come.
yeah, well, I mean,
And
I
talk to
fault them
us.
for not having a posted
So,
town in the first place.
Yeah,
We told me, but I looked at the rules, I didn't see anything against it.
yeah,
Right, there's nothing obligating
Yeah.
to do anything
yeah.
at this point.
this isn't their first party, by the
No,
way.
it's not.
And I think-
Billed as number
So
seven.
number
Well,
seven.
yeah, but it's not the first party
Oh,
of
there.
extended party and repeated, because that's what they did last year, and that's why the neighbors are uncomfortable. And I don't think we should be putting the neighbors in this position. If we have, they have approached us and they said,
Yeah.
you're not gonna do anything. And I think the thing is that when we first heard about it, you went with the idea of telling them this isn't acceptable, and they did what they're doing to the neighbors with you. They kept promising and telling you and okay. And then,
Mhm.
you know, so it's,
Well, he tried to make the point when I first talked to him that it was a private party. And I said,
130,
no,
no,
I said, and I told him, you know, no judge is going to agree based on what's on your website that it's a private party. It's a commercial activity, it's not permitted use. So, well, I'll make it a private party, is basically what he
no.
What do you-
Do we need to vote on
tried to
this?
do.
Yes, there's a motion on the floor. We need to vote.
If we're done discussing, we can go to a vote.
So I'll
May I
second.
add some information?
No.
No,
Are you sure?
Okay.
we need to vote.
Yeah, I suppose. Go ahead, Janice.
Oh, ready for the vote? Okay, Connors,
Yes,
Hanson,
Yes.
Hunter,
yes,
Woodworth,
Yes,
Daniel.
Yes.
the biggest problem with not doing this carefully is setting a precedent
right.
for anyone in the future that says, oh, well, they got away with it.
just come and talk to us. Yeah.
So we're talking of the letter from Guy, the notice of violation,
Yes,
as opposed to a cease and desist. Now, the concern remains, as Steve put it, if he doesn't do what he said he was going to do, and there is no shuttle, and if that many people should, however many people show up, if it's 300 people, it's already a problem. If it's 2,000 people, it's a much bigger problem. But either way, the potential is there for there to be parking on both sides of the road and creating a public safety hazard. That's
Is it a county road?
that's a county road.
Okay, well,
Now, now there's other pieces that have to be put in place.
Mhm.
One is to talk to Highway and
sure.
and get their suggestions of what to do and what they think they need to do to protect the public in that situation.
Mhm.
The other one is to contact the county police that this thing is going to take place, if it takes place, and that, so that they can be ready to do, they'll make their own plans.
Yeah.
That's not us making the plan.
Can they be copied on the letter from Guy? Yeah,
That would be a good idea.
That's a good idea.
that's the
Yeah.
easiest way. Yep.
yeah.
Both the county, both the highway department
I
and
could still buy
County
tickets
and-
right
yeah.
now.
What'd you say?
I can still buy tickets right now. He said he'd take it down.
Well, he said that if you try to buy tickets, it'll show you that, you can enter 0 and still get them.
I just tried that, I was able to do that.
You couldn't get 0,
I wasn't able to,
you buy tickets at all, or?
I was able to change the $57.
Mhm.
$56.48.
What? That's what a ticket is?
That's for the weekend pass.
$56.40.
Yeah,
She's got it
$30
here.
$30 for one day or
It includes a fee that
Who the hell would
you
do
know,
that?
event rate.
Oh, all right, I got
2
it.
days, 25 bands. Not bad, no. There's a good band there, and a lot of them
It's on
look.
August 23rd.
It's not a proper place for it, period.
No, it's not.
I don't think we should make any excuses about whether the people are nice musicians or any of that.
Yeah.
I don't think that
It'd be nice to have
isn't
somewhere
about
else. Yeah.
it's not, I mean, it's not about being mean or anything. It's just simply not a proper place. It's not in the zoning.
The residents.
Period.
living in that area.
Right.
So,
I don't
That's
disagree.
okay.
I don't disagree.
Right, so, you know, we're all trying to figure out ways to be nice about it, but the precedent issue is a really big deal.
Big deal.
Well, I mean,
Very.
in my mind, the critical thing is it a private party?
No,
And if it's not, then it's clearly not it's not permitted use, it's a violation of our zoning.
for $30, I can do tent camp.
Yeah, where?
I mean, we've been, some of us here have been to private
Guys
parties
bought
that have been a little large, but they're not.
Have you bought tickets? I got a better
There you
deal
go.
over here.
You can't,
I
you
think
can't
I
put
know
it zero
somebody-
instead or something.
My niece is a lawyer and she's working on the sub-hub problem. Sounds like sub-hub to me. it just takes a few people to set one up.
5648.
Oh, brother.
Weekend, whole weekend.
Yeah,
Anyway, it's
Okay.
too bad.
it is too
It's a
bad.
bad, it's sad.
Uh,
Okay.
it's just people trying to have a good time.
Try again next year.
Musicians.
Try again.
Try in a
Come to it.
better location.
Come to it.
Try and find a location that
Get
works.
input, whatever.
Right, which right now is not the town of Danby. Unless we.
Maybe where he's located all this parking, you know.
Well, I mean, there,
Yeah, I'm not very big fan of taking up all the county park and ride either. I mean, I simply don't think that's I
Not
don't
for
think
2
we
days.
should agree that it's okay for somebody to have a private anything or.
People use that for the
anything
bus.
And use that parking.
it's on weekend.
So what?
Yeah,
It's
it is.
not, there's.
I have seen, there was an event a couple weeks ago that that park and ride was used.
Yeah.
The 3,000?
I don't know how, there were two buses.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know.
But where are the cars?
They were,
Up and down the road?
they were all over, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, Keith, I spoke with Keith about potentially posting the town, Traver and Hill,
Traver Road.
Traver and Hill,
Okay,
and he's okay with doing it.
Okay.
If we want to do it, as you said, you could buy tomato steaks and do, just paper signs with in a slip in.
With the date?
I mean, that's also saying, oh, this event is gonna happen.
Well, clearly that's going to happen, whether or not the.
Well, if it
parking
starts
happens or
happening, then
not.
maybe we need to put those up, but I
No,
wouldn't
no.
put them up
It
now.
should be, put them up first. We don't want people parking there and then have to go and try to get them, and have somebody try to move them away.
They get towed. I mean,
Well, if they'll have notice that they're going to get towed if we post it.
Yeah, yeah.
as far as I know, there's no parking on town roads. Is that right, Dan Klein? Yes,
I didn't find it.
I'll find it for you.
Practically speaking, that's not gonna happen. The
Right.
only thing that you can do is put out preventative measures as much as you can.
Yes.
I volunteer to go talk to Keith, and so that we get some communication going with Keith about this thing, that even though we're telling them they can't do it, it's still probably gonna happen.
Right.
And that we need to do some things about preparation for this stuff without blowing the budget.
That's
And-
why,
And so that's one thing.
Yes,
Second thing
we do
is
sign.
police. And I will, with Steve, call them and find out what it is that they're can do about it.
They could park themselves at the parking lot.
Well, they can park themselves right there, yeah,
Yeah,
but they're in the same position. They don't want to get.
No.
Right? So it really is about letting people know that this is ill-advised, to say the least, and prohibited within the town without going through proper channels.
okay. So with that and a letter.
Okay,
Now, are there any roads that are county roads? Do we need to post?
South
county roads?
Danby, South Danby.
Traver and Hill Road, right?
we'll do whatever we have to talk to other
South Danby
municipalities
Road
to
County.
make sure that they also are apprised of what's going
Good,
Yeah,
good, good.
on. Okay?
Yep.
I'll do that within the week.
okay.
And you want to
Thank
help with that, then we can, if you want, because I've been spending a lot of time,
I'm gonna try to do it as quickly as possible.
yeah,
So,
county highway and the county sheriff need to be, put on, basically notified that
This is
there's a
potentially happening.
potential problem here, and that if they can, they might want to post the road, no parking. We could post the town roads, no parking, if we want to do that.
It's Traver and Hill Road. that's
Traver and Hill,
it.
right. So, as a precautionary move, just in case he doesn't do what he said he was going to do, and he assured me that he was going to, but
It's not happening.
we should, it would be prudent to post it, even though it's a
Okay.
little bit of
Yeah,
effort.
we want to make sure things are safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that public safety is a paramount concern.
Right, so we do want to post them, so you'll check with it. Okay,
You want a motion from the board?
to talk to Keith,
No, to post the roads.
isn't that within his province?
Yeah.
To make those decisions?
Yeah,
Yes.
then fine, you can talk to Keith.
Yeah.
Paul's gonna start reading.
I also think that this is prompting that we need to look, there are a few things in the zoning that we know have to come up, and David has mentioned it. We do have things in zoning that need to be reviewed, and that we need, maybe we.
Well, we can, you know, we can, after the fact, we can ask the question, do we want to put something into a zoning which would not enable this sort of a gathering to happen in the town of Danby? Because right now,
Or
it's not permitted.
or to enable it with certain.
Well, no, I mean, how we would enable it, but to enable it at all. You can say, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna say, you know, you have to do it, you're gonna have to get a permit, you have to go through site plan review with the planning board and, you know, and have, make sure that it's all carefully planned and it's not gonna be creating problems.
I wasn't suggesting that we decide that right now.
I'm not
Suggesting
suggesting that we do it either.
Okay, I'm suggesting, but I am suggesting that we ask the town board, the planning, our planner, to put this on I'm gonna say a priority list. That we need to, there are certain things in zoning that have even been discussed in the last several months that, and David has made recommendations too. Clearly, we have some things we need to
Probably ought
work
to
at.
put a list together of things that we want to change in the zoning.
Well, I-
We now have several things,
Right.
some of which have made it way onto our wish list.
Right.
Yeah.
But we don't have to wait until we get a whole list that's complete that everybody wants
No,
before we
it's
can
true.
start, and that's on the list now.
Right.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting is that this ought to be on the list of things that should be visited.
As soon as possible, right? If we can.
We have other things
they're
on the
working.
list that we keep putting off.
Right.
So we'll add it to the list.
And since Greg and David are working on weekends, I would ask that we would ask the new Greg to ask the old David, what are the things that have been on your mind that needed to be addressed? And make sure that Greg has that little help.
Yeah. Well, like I say, those are mostly
I have.
around the wish list.
Okay, we don't need to decide it or fix it or anything, just ask them to get on it.
I'm just pulling it out right now. I'm gonna put it on.
Okay. All right. Can we move on?
Yeah.
I have an assumption that this is,
This
a
is
fellow from
C.
Hertz.
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry.
you look,
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. Hopefully it rains at the time of the event to avoid disaster.
I was just
Problem
wondering
will be
about.
solved, yeah.
Good point.
You're out there and do a rain dance.
Yeah, we talked about this while we were waiting for you to show up, and we ended up talking about it.
That's perfectly fine. My apologies for being later than I expected. I had another meeting tonight and I was just trying to squeeze it in. And for that, I didn't realize that you had a large online contingent. I'm on the town board and we can't get more peers to come to the meeting, let alone get anybody to show up on an online meeting.
We don't have a large
Town.
contingent.
I'm in the town of Southport. And, no, I'm here to talk about the wastewater.
Right.
And given that you have an online presence, I'd be happy for you.
yeah, why don't, you can bring a chair up and put the mic down so you can sit and have your papers.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right.
Up to you.
Yeah, because they can't hear you unless you speak.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My apologies. So yeah,
So welcome.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. And I don't know as if, you had passed out a copy of the draft report or if you.
Well, it was supposed to get.
Some people saw it.
Yeah, that's right. The board had access to it, but only recently.
Okay.
And the public was supposed to have access in conjunction with the posting of the agenda, but it didn't get linked until, I think it's probably linked by now, but.
It's
anyway, they
not
haven't
linked.
And the thing is, this could be the introduction and we can have subsequent meetings. This is not, hey, I'm coming here and speaking and then we're going away and closing out the project. So I know that with, when we started this, there was some meeting restrictions and things of that nature. So we're more than, willing to come back and have greater discussions because this is a big deal. And I think how it started was,
You could close it to the mic, because
it was kind of getting an echo and I didn't know.
because you hear it back from there, but I'm not sure that they can hear it. There aren't that many people there. Well, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think how it started was, there had been really in the central and West Danby, hamlets and some of the surrounding area, there had been some desire to, or, there's small parcels, there had been some growth and given some of the environmental constraints, some of those environmental constraints are high groundwater, nearby waterways, things of that nature, coupled with the small parcels, and the businesses and the growth, what to do with the wastewater. And I think there was an initiative by the town several years ago, and that we had responded to, but there was limited funds available, I think, from the county at that time.
Right.
And yeah, and so we had let the supervisor and your former planner know that there were other funds out there from the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation, to do a study and to look at it in greater depth. And that's when we worked with the town to apply for those funds, and you were able to secure those. And so the ultimate money for the study would be done as part of the grant. And to date, and I don't believe it's the case because in-kind services can be provided, there's no out-of-pocket expense from the town. And so I think that's one nice thing that the state and the grant funds have been able to afford the opportunity to the town. And those monies have been leveraged to initiate the study, which we can talk about tonight. And then I can follow up with another meeting where I could have a presentation where it could show to some of the online members, if that's desired. So the task is to really look at the central and West Danby Hamlet areas and the surrounding development. And what I mean by surrounding development is roughly no more than really a mile or so in each direction, the areas that have the larger dense development and what could take place there, with the idea of the hamlet centers being the primary focus. And so we looked at that. And one of the things that I think was important and why you were funded from a state level is you probably know, I'm probably preaching to the choir, is the Cayuga Lake in New York State DEC, they've had algal blooms and other water quality issues to the point where they're seeking to establish what's called a TMDL, a total maximum daily load, for nutrients to go to that lake. And one of the components outside of probably some of the other obvious things like, maybe agricultural over fertilization and things of that nature, is septic systems that may be aging, that may not meet current standards, or may be failing, which is an issue in itself, and I can talk about that. That they may be in close proximity to tributaries to Cayuga Lake. And so the DEC and the state was interested in saying, okay, well, if there is a study, and because you do a study, it doesn't obligate, thank you very much. It doesn't, I may need your help throughout the presentation. It doesn't obligate the town to do anything. However, the state has indicated if there is some identification or some need there, that this would likely score high because of the issues associated with Cayuga Lake and the waters in and around Central and West Danby Hamlet areas are tributary to. And you can stop me anytime. This is not a formal presentation, so if there's any questions along the way, I'd be happy to answer those. So we looked at various aspects. The study and the program itself was funded by New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation. And it's through their engineering planning grant program. There's all sorts of acronyms in the report. I know this is one thing that drove the supervisor nuts. And so it's they call it an EPG. And one of their requirements are to really look at sewering, the area in a conventional method, sewering it in the capacity of connecting to the nearest adjacent municipality and what that may cost. That's a requirement, even though one would perceive immediately to say, that's just that's a significant distance and would be enormous cost in of itself, which you're right. And then also, in any other fashion. And so we looked at sewering the hamlet centers and the surrounding developed area by those particular aspects, doing sewage collection systems, taking that and conveying it to a nearby municipality, looking at sewering those developed areas and having on-site wastewater treatment system, a more conventional, like a municipal, like you would see at the city of Ithaca or something along those lines, you know, or looking at much smaller package units, which could be used on a cluster of parcels that could be even expanded to a much greater number of parcels, even to the point of maybe a hamlet center. And so we looked at those various options. And when you look at treatment, that can come in a variety of forms, and those packages or those black boxes, a lot of different things can happen inside of those. But largely, given the fact of anytime you have a wastewater treatment plant, you need a disposal area, and that disposal area can take a couple forms. It could be discharged to a surface, and that could be a roadside ditch, that could be a small intermittent stream, or it could be a larger stream. And one would say, well, if we're trying to keep it out of the waterways, why the heck would we put it there in the first place? The New York State DEC does look at that, and they set the limits of what any wastewater treatment system would be based upon those receiving water bodies. And when we looked at it as trying to meet intermittent stream standards. Intermittent stream standards are you could discharge it to an area where that could dry up and there's no receiving flow, and so nothing to dilute it with or anything like that. Very, very stringent standards. And so that's how we looked at that. I think that gives you if you were ever to move ahead, that gives you flexibility if you could meet those standards on wherever you could put a wastewater treatment system. Because there are, I know it didn't sound like from the discussion before, there's not a lot of areas in which to have something, but there is, you can move around a wastewater treatment plant, based upon pumping systems and force mains. It could be put in a variety of areas. It wouldn't have to be necessarily put right in a developed area. It could be put out back or up on a hillside away from that. But not every area has a receiving water body next to it. And so if it doesn't, that could go, that could again take a variety of forms. That could go into a drainage way. That could go into a downstream absorption field, depending on the size of the treatment system. So a number of things a number of forms that could take, that could take. And so we looked at those, and so we broke the study apart into the hamlet centers plus the surrounding area, and then you can also get into any number of variations with respect to, do you want to look at small clusters? Do you want to look at just three parcels that put in the system, or 6 parcels or 8 parcels, or what have you?
And that would enable also things like eco village clusters outside of the hamlet, but tighter.
And there's a number of small systems, like for instance, one that you find discussed in the report is it's a system that it's a membrane system. It's a filtration system using a membrane, filters quite a bit out, and it's a membrane bioreactor, and that could be made as small as used for one house. It can be made as large, and it can be modularized so that you can add many of these together so you could serve a whole hamlet center. When you have something like that, it's unique. If it's just for one house, the cost for that unit is expensive. The $20,000 to $30,000 range, coupled with when you have a system like that for a small set of homes, there's a maintenance agreement, because it's not as though the homeowner is going to maintain that themselves. So there's a maintenance agreement you must have. If you have a company that specializes in that, you could see $500 to $700 a year just to have a maintenance agreement for something like that. So when you get into smaller, you don't realize the economy of scale. It can get quite expensive for just 1, 2, 3 units to do something like that. And so I would suspect for something to occur, and this speaks to our recommendation, which I'll get to a little later, for something to occur, likely that would take place at a minimum at the hamlet center level. Because if you try to go smaller, just the economy of scale are tough to make it reasonable for a much smaller subset of houses or individuals or businesses.
Try to ask.
Oh yeah.
Hamlet is how big? 50 houses?
No, there is. I want to see.
1 mile.
I have that.
there's a chart in here listed.
Yeah, so the central Danby area is basically essentially 16,
Yeah.
and the West Danby is 42, the Hamlet Center. Okay, so those are small when you look at a collection or a wastewater system themselves, so that's very small. And so I think it's nice to, if one of our recommendations is, I'll just mention it, we did recommend as part of that, when we looked at the greater projects, we looked at, the recommendation would be is focus on the Hamlet centers, develop a system that could be expandable, that as if people or interests arose or funding arose, that could be expanded and built upon so that that could then service a much greater area.
You wouldn't have to supplant it.
Correct. And I think yeah, and what you raised, Supervisor, is a great point, because part of this study is not only to say, and it's not the intent of the study to force a wastewater system or whatever. It's more or less a planning document. Well, part of the planning document, you can say, okay, well, if we focus on the central areas, where could we put some of the infrastructure? And then therefore, if it didn't happen within this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years, it could be a planning tool that if lands became available, they could be secured for purposes of that future planning. And so we looked at a variety of collection systems. There's all sorts of collection systems out there, and probably some of you, and maybe other areas that you've lived have utilized some of these. You have gravity collection systems. You have areas where you can't flow via gravity and your house pumps into a system. And then sometimes the collection system is pressurized in lieu of gravity. And when it's pressurized, that flow can go anywhere. And that's where I was speaking before. You could put a wastewater system in a variety of different areas. And I think that offers some flexibility. We looked at a large variety of treatment options, and whether it's, again, conventional, and we looked at, these are terms that you probably don't care about, but we looked at activated sludge, we looked at fixed film, we looked at membrane, all various aspects of treatment to try to see what would be economical, what would be expandable and modular, be able to be used from a modular format and expandable. And so our ultimate recommendation, and I can go through some costs with you. And keep in mind, when we did this, we just came out of COVID. COVID and the inflation that went along with COVID was drastic. As a result of that, some of the funding programs have said, when you cost something up, you should put in enough contingency. So if this were to occur and you were to construct something within a reasonable time frame, we want to make sure that you have sufficient budget. So when I do mention costs, these are things that are without funding. These are things that have a 30% contingency attached to them. That's what the funding agencies speak to. So 30% of a project cost, that's a significant value when you're just saying the project is, 70 and we're going to put 30, that's just extra money that's hanging there in case you need it, whether it's inflation or anything else. That's a huge chunk of the overall cost. So keep that in mind. And then again, the biggest thing is it's without funding. And I think a lot of these projects wouldn't be palatable to the end user or wouldn't be practical without funding because of just the sheer size of the areas. And so again, our recommendation was to put in a collection system. If it were to be pursued, the most practical would be to start at the Hamlet Center. And a sewer system for Central Danby would the project cost for that just to serve 16 individuals, but you lay the groundwork for future use, that is $2.5 million. That's significant.
Yeah, sure.
And when you look at it from an equivalent dwelling unit basis, and I'll bring it in perspective, and it doesn't sound as far-fetched as it seems, but to bring it in perspective, that's to serve 16 individuals. That is over 30 years at a 4.5% interest rate. Depending on the programs that you would apply for, and if you get grants, there are programs out there that can bring you down to 0% interest rate through the state. I'm not saying that that would ultimately be secured, but when you go at these things, you want to be conservative, and you don't want to plan for something, make it appealing, and you go to try to implement that action and it's not obtainable. That is the disaster in of itself. But if you looked at it over 30 years at 4.5% interest, you also added in the operation and maintenance costs associated with that. Without any funding and with the conditions I mentioned before, that is roughly $1,094 per household a year. That's a lot of money. And that is without funding. However, one item that we have looked at when we've looked at other wastewater systems in other communities, if you look at, an area such as this where you might have high groundwater, you have spatial constraints and things of that nature, if you put in a septic system, a septic system replacement could easily cost you $25,000. And if you look at a septic system and you divide that just over 30 years, right there is $830 or more a year just for replacement of septic system amortized over 30 years, not including any borrowing costs or anything that might coincide with that. So when you look at it from that perspective, the $1,000 doesn't seem too far-fetched. However, I would still agree that that is still a significant cost to an end user, and I don't think would be something you would pursue without other grants or any funding. But I think
How about grants?
Yeah.
Are grants available? Is that like?
They are. And right as of now, we're probably about 2 years into it. Since the 1980s Bond Act, the EPA Bond Act, there's probably more money now than ever for municipal type utilities. And I'm not certain how long it'll last. During COVID, they canceled it 1 year because of obviously COVID, but then also some budget issues. And so they didn't follow their normal schedule and it wasn't available. But since the federal infrastructure package was passed, that has been filtered down to the state level, as well as the state programs have really focused some of their initiatives on the local level. There's quite a bit of money through the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation, through the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, through the Community Development Block Program, which is part of the Office of Housing and Community Renewal. There is a fair amount of funds out there. Now, if you look at the West Danby Hamlet Center, which has 42, the cost to sewer that is $4.1 million. When you look at that cost amortized over 30 years, and you add the operation and maintenance costs in, we're predicting that is about $632 per year per household. Again, your economy of scale, a little bit more manageable, but still that is significant, especially when you have homes or people that don't immediately have a problem or have just replaced their system, and you implement something like this. There's never a good time, and it's obviously a community discussion, and it's something that is handled in that manner. Obviously, I think for the folks on the phone and the folks listening here tonight, I don't think that, the town board can't move ahead and say, well, this looks good, let's move ahead. There has to be districts formed. The districts formed, there's public hearings that go along with that. There can be petitions. There's all sorts of public interaction, and it is a long process to go from a study like this to actually implementation, with a lot of public interaction and a lot of steps along the way that if you don't go petition route, they're always subject to permissive referendum and the like. So there's a lot of protective steps, not only as the state put in place, but something I know that the town board, hearing you discuss tonight, would definitely, take into consideration with the potential public.
Have you talked to our local Thomas County Health Department?
Yes.
And did you assess the state of those systems that now exist within the hamlet?
Thank you for bringing that up. I was contemplating leaving that alone, but I know. Well, it's something.
You're gonna just say we didn't do it.
Yeah, well, it's a double-edged sword, and so it's this is always a conundrum when you look at it. So we actually did put a survey out. We got limited responses, and probably you had seen the survey or had received it yourselves. And we got some responses. I think we got in the vicinity of maybe 6 to 7% of all the surveys. We're hoping to 15 to 30, but we didn't get it.
From the owners.
Not
And-
from the health department.
No, but the health department was involved with reviewing that survey, and then they have been involved with interaction. We have discussed that with them, or discussed this project with them. We've talked about it with Matt Russo, the New York State DEC's representative for this region. And so there's been a lot of discussion. But when you get to septic systems, part of this, if you were ever to go for funds, the need for the project is a big thing. Anytime you go for funds, it's a competitive nature. You are competing against the town of Newfield, the city of Syracuse, the town of Southport, any place like that. And it comes down to need.
Based on an environmental assessment.
Yeah, based on what's put in here and based, whether it's the need is Cayuga Lake, the TMDL, it's failed septic systems, it's spatial constraints, it's public demand for the system. All those things are taken into consideration by the reviewing agency. But when you get into on-site septic systems, our survey asked, do people have problems? We did not report that, oh, yes, people had problems with their system, because once a problem is identified, that needs to be notified to the code enforcement officer. The code enforcement officer then needs to show up at the individual's home and say, you got a problem with your septic system, you need to fix it. And that is a touchy situation.
Well, that's why I asked about the status of the system.
Yeah.
I mean, I look around here, there are older homes for the most part, and that means they have older septic systems, which means they aren't what more recent developments are putting in. So the more recent developments would have less onus to pursue something like this.
Right.
So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah. No, it's a tough situation, and no matter what community it's in, when you have the public meetings and the public interaction, whether it's a public hearing or a public informational session, you have a measurable percentage that I just put in a septic system, or mine's new, or I haven't had problems. And there is, again, I can't reiterate enough, there's never necessarily a good time to, hopefully people look at it for the benefit of the area, whether it's environmental concerns, it's business growth, it's whatever it is, or it's protection of their own property from their neighbor's property.
I got another question.
Yeah.
So the monetary amount would be funded by us, the town as a general whole, not by the individual homeowners that are being serviced.
Right. So
We have to have a consensus amongst the entire town to put out this kind of funds.
Well, no, yes and no. I mean, you create a district, and it's the participants in the district that are assessed for.
So it is the individual homes.
Like the
So
water,
the 16 houses,
like the water district.
so the 16 houses would be the ones that would,
vote or be subject to any
Okay.
action that take place. Yes. And
and they would be the ones that would be accepting the financial burden.
correct.
Okay.
I would say whatever the remaining financial burden is, I would hope that if anything did proceed, that the town would work with that team, go after funding, and whatever was lingering, that would be presented to the district when the district was formed, and the people would either say, yep, we're agreement with that, or no, we're not.
I'm going to go backwards.
The district
again.
would be formed.
So someone's going out to solicit. See, the first thing I'm thinking of is there's got to be some kind of meeting amongst the people who are
Let
part of the district.
me describe the whole process, and that might answer some of those.
Yes.
So if you were to, let's say, for instance, you were deciding to potentially pursue a, sewering an area, whatever that may be. Obviously, you have a study. You could solicit funds. Some funds you can solicit without doing any more in a study.
Solicit from the state.
Yes. Some funds require other prerequisites. Some of those prerequisites are you need to form the district before you can apply for the funds. And so
The cart before the horse.
exactly. And part of that is,
You did have the idea of a flowing district.
yeah, but part of it is you could, if you went and some of the funding agencies want to know that you're serious before you come to them. And so if you form districts, regardless of what a defined area, if it's a greater area and there's floating benefit areas inside that, if you form them, they know that you're serious. And then when you apply for funds, some of the just people looking for funds are weeded out by that time. And so there is a district formation requirement ultimately either before the funds are solicited or before the project moves ahead. Anything within a town, if you're going to sewer, you must form some level of a district. And when you form a district, you have to go through public hearings. District formation is again subject to this. Yeah, and it could be voted down. If, let's say, and there's a lot of methods to form a district. You can vote it. You can form it via petition. You can go out and say, here's the cost. Here's the area you want to serve, and people sign it. And if you get more than 51%, more than 50%, there's a couple thresholds. There's a threshold in terms of just the number of percentage of voters in there, and then there's a percentage of the actual number of residential units in there. Because if you had like a Walmart and 5 single-family households, and Walmart signed on, then who cares what the rest of the residential household? Walmart carried the day. So there's different thresholds to protect the residential end user. You can form it via petition. The town board can pass a motion and do it subject to permissive referendum. Or you can just go right to a vote. And so those are different ways that you can form a district. But a project would move ahead.
Paper entity.
Pardon me?
That's just a paper entity.
And if you formed a district, and this has happened, you can form a district, and if the funds aren't acquired, you can leave it as a district floating in the ether and just not going anywhere. However, in communities where that has happened, if there is renewed interest down the road, and you go back to those same 8 entities where you applied for funds and you formed a district, you applied for funds and you didn't do anything, they're much more skeptical the next time that is going to happen. And I've seen it where USDA has said, you've been to us before, you didn't do it. And so you must, instead of doing the normal prerequisites to apply for funds, now they want you to do the normal stuff plus B. And so that makes it a little bit more challenging in the future. So it's definitely not something to take lightly. It's something that you would want to obviously vet with the public and vet with and go through the processes and have the public informational meetings.
So if you're forming a district, you've already started the process.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes.
And you have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And district formation, I would suspect if, let's say, for instance, you were heavily considering, you had constituents that said, we'd definitely be interested in this. We wish you would push that ahead. I would say the earliest you could form a district is a year from now, because of that process,
Right.
Of the public information, the public hearings, the ability to have time for permissive referendums. And then even if you form a district locally, it still has to be sent to the state for comptroller's approval. And so there's lots of different steps along the way. And so this is, while this seems, some people may glean a study as presumptuous and, this should happen or shouldn't happen. Either way, this is just the first step of many that would have to take place to, bring a project to reality.
And I think one of the other points, especially for the hamlets, is the options of development, which doesn't exist now, which means it's not the current homeowners that are going to be benefiting, but the town as a whole and people who want to do something who can't.
Right. And I think Central Danby is a little bit more critical than West Danby because that has private water and sewer. And when you have water and sewer on spatial, small lots, you have to have separation distances. In the health department, and it doesn't, it always hasn't happened. And there are waivers. You're supposed to have 100 feet between a well and a septic system. And sometimes you can't have that. And if you have a developed lot and a well fails or a septic system fails and something has to move and you can't get that anywhere on your lot, that could be, very difficult for the owner. And so this affords them some options if that were to take place, not only with the residences, but businesses especially. Give you, for instance, in Odessa, there was a building that's had vacant for years. And they just had it as a bookstore or anything that didn't really use water because it just couldn't find a spot on their property to place a septic system, and the health department just would not grant them anything. And so they just had limited to virtually no use of their property for a significant period of time. So, but yeah, so that was, I know that's a brief overview.
Sure.
And I know that you have the report. And what I've talked to the supervisor is we'll however long it takes, any input that's gleaned, we'll take that, we'll evaluate that, we'll add that to the report, we'll modify the report, we will come back, we'll have greater discussions. And then if you do wanted to proceed or you wanted to have other public meetings, we can come and have, greater discussions. But I know that we haven't been here, and it seems odd that we're coming here with, or you're seeing a report and you're hearing us for the first time.
But it's not quite the first time, because I mean, the board has been briefed, why we ended up going the way we went. Originally we got a grant from the county, and that was aimed at, it was driven by the recognition that if we're going to focus growth in the hamlets, this is what the comprehensive plan called for, that we can't have hamlet density without some sort of shared wastewater treatment somehow, whether it's some special on-site treatment plant or shared septic systems or something. And the original grant was supposed to look at what those options were, but $10,000 wasn't near enough to do it. Nobody would touch it. Jim said, there's other money out there, and was instrumental in getting us this larger grant to take a bigger picture look. And one thing we learned early on when we were dealing with a proposal over in West Danby for development on the shore was that if you were going to create a district, the state wanted you to have looked at all the options. So even though it might not make sense, as Tim alluded to, for us to put in a sewer system and pump the effluent to the Ithaca wastewater treatment plant, you had to look at that as a possibility in order to look at the whole, spectrum of possibility. So this grant looks at all the possibilities, from including that one. It looked at the possibility of doing something just with the core, just with clusters within the core instead of the whole core even. Like the one property with some sort of, or multiple properties, but with a shared system. And then the possibility of scaling those or augmenting them with time, but coming up with a plan for how do we enable hamlet density development, which is what we say we want to do. We can't, on the one hand, say, we don't want to develop a perimeter, we want to focus growth in the hamlets without a plan for how that happens. And the critical component is dealing with wastewater. So that was the driver in my mind.
Yeah. And I think some of the things you mentioned is in the surveys, the responses that we had in the survey said no to sewering a greater area, but yes to sewering the hamlet centers. And so that was a common theme throughout the responses that we did get back in. And I know they're documented and summarized in the appendices. But that was one thing, and it was interesting. A lot of responses were, we don't have problems with ours, but we know of problems in other areas. So it's, again, getting back to your point of it's a touchy situation when you really start saying, okay, is there failed septics, and trying to identify them, and you try to tread lightly around there, but still paint the picture to a funding agency that there is that need.
We can pass. They've known about it.
So, but yeah, and I apologize for being long-winded. I know you have a long night, but it's
Considering what you're presenting, you're not long-winded at all.
sure. And again, I don't want to make this seem like it's the only time and we're more than happy to schedule more than happy to come here, more than happy to join online and do a presentation for others, whatever the case may be. But I'm presuming you'll have questions as you go through this, and we'll ferret those out, include it, and then whatever the resulting copy is, or the report is, that's something hopefully that the board is happy with. And
What's the deadline for submission?
For this, we can submit it at any time, and that is just for funding purposes, but for purposes of the town, that if it takes you 6 months to work through questions or whatever, we'll work with you for 6 months. So if there's something you want feedback or you want, if you guys have questions, we'll look at the questions, review those, incorporate them, modify the report. I don't have that answer right in front of me. I was more focused on this, but for some odd reason, I thought it was submission was maybe October, November, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere in that range, but.
I mean, your willingness to accommodate us, beyond the submission deadline
Yeah.
for the grant is a very valuable.
Well, I just know it's not something that, it takes some digestion and sometimes you don't, get the feedback or, something may come up later on. From your point is, if you were ever to consider funding, the next round of funding would be due at the end of July of 2024. And there are programs you can go after. One thing that we often do for communities, there's a program through the New York State DEC called the Water Quality Improvement Project Program. And that is called the WQIP. And that has very little prerequisites. Quite often we'll work with communities to go after that to see how you kind of stack up against other communities, other funding requests. You're scored, you're potentially awarded or not awarded funds, but you don't have to go through those district formation or those processes, and you can kind of see where you may be in the grand scheme of things or what the fundability of a project is at that point in time. And then if you get that helps you understand, okay, now I've got momentum, I've got some funds, let's now take this and form districts and move ahead from there. That's a quite common approach.
Water quality improvement program is through what?
That's a New York State DEC sponsored program. Yep. Yeah. And it's, if you type in NYS DEC WQIP, those programs will probably come up in the first.
So the study, this is just informational stuff. So the study that you did on this hamlet, I mean, we have a stream right out here. Does it take into account how much is getting into that stream? Is there something in there that says how much?
No, we did not do tests of the stream. And that is something that could be done. And it's been done before where there's been testing done above a hamlet, streams flow through, and you test it below the hamlet and you really look at E. coli levels or bacteria levels, and you see if there's been a significant increase. The only problem with those is they can vary drastically.
Yeah. Sure.
And so you can, even if there's no contamination, you could take samples and get a much higher reading downstream than you do upstream. And so it's not a common thing to do, and I don't think a necessary thing to do for funding purposes. But we haven't in this instance. Quite often, maybe the local soil and water can help facilitate that, because they do, a lot of times they will have water quality testing instrumentation.
SCFI, right?
Well, what I'm more concerned, about is just movement, like you're talking all about the watershed. And if we're a big contributor to that through the hamlet or whatever, that's what I would like to know before anything else is what the environmental impact is.
Yeah.
So how or when or where. So soil and water, I'll ask the soil and water people. Hopefully some of the people I still know there are still there.
Okay, and that might be a good start. And again, if there is grants and you wanted to pursue grants, that could be added, fairly easily, depending on, you could do testing, and depending on what the results of the testing were, added or not, that is an option.
It seems, we all know that there's a watershed, and we know what's happening to the lake. I was just kayaking out there. The weeds in there are just going nuts how far north that stuff is there. But again, we hear about it. I don't understand the science of how that watershed gets impacted and how you find out where other sources of that come.
So there's quite a few studies on that, and you can access those through the New York State DEC website. And if you go to the New York State DEC website and you put in Cayuga Lake TMDL, You type, it's just TMDL, those initials. Yep, you'll see, and in there, there's a whole page dedicated to the Cable Lake TMDL. And this has been going on for quite some time.
I've seen some of that.
Yep, and in there, there'll be links and other information on study.
General.
Some of it is, but there is, when you do a TMDL for the justification of that, because it can put hardship on people, farmers, things of that nature. There are studies that go along with those. And they are available, whether it's, immediately online or the whole thing's online, or they are accessible at DEC. And if you want any, again, I've been corresponding with Matt Russo from New York State DEC on this. And I'm sure we could talk to Matt. I'm sure he, may weigh in, or he may be able to direct us and provide some of that information.
Okay.
But I think it's enough to, I think
if we were to test, I would be astonished to find we were a significant part of the problem, but
No,
the,
I know.
the elephant in the room is the agricultural runoff.
Yes.
yeah. But they look at every contributor, like for instance, the Chesapeake Bay did a TMDL in the Chesapeake Bay. They reach as far north as Tully, New York. And if you can remove septic systems that may potentially ultimately get, discharge nutrients to Chesapeake Bay, I've seen communities funded on that sole basis, all the way to the Chesapeake Bay.
Wow.
And so they look at it not as though, going after the agriculture or whatever. They look at it as what can we do with everything, and let's try to address anything and everything within that watershed. And not everybody applies for them. So I think they try to take the resource they have and tackle as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I know New York City's watershed, lot to address, because they have an untreated source.
Yeah, there's significant restriction there. But it's in here, like the Chesapeake Bay or Cable Lake, there's a lot less restriction. So I think you find money available for mitigated measures such as this to overall hope to improve the greater good.
Yeah. The context we're dealing with here is that most of the funding is aimed at reducing problems. The thrust of what we're looking to is to enable smart growth, essentially, in higher density than the health department. I mean, you can't have a hamlet with 1 acre lots. And the health department minimum for if you're creating a lot is an acre, absent public water or sewers. And even with the water district, it only drops it to half an acre. The critical thing is the wastewater treatment for the density.
Yep.
So if we want to create a downtown that looks like one and not like a suburb, we need some sort of shared wastewater to do it. And this is a big step in the direction of identifying what the options are for doing it.
Yeah. Not inexpensive, but. So, but yeah, thank you for your time. And again, if there's any more questions, and again, you can forward them to the supervisor and he can forward them on to me. And again, if there's more interest or after you digest this, whether it's in September, October, whatever, we can come back or have greater discussions. Or if you want to have a workshop dedicated solely to this, we can do that as well.
Yeah, all those possibilities.
Yeah.
Get our new planner on board here.
He's going to hit the ground running.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
thank you, Tim.
well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Can't be anything with the clear. I know. If we're going to go on, we have to give ourselves more time. Otherwise, we can not go on.
May not.
I hear and I think not.
I think not. We also have, leaving here to stop.
Yes, that's right.
And the next thing was, the next item was to be dropped anyway.
Well, because there are no updates on noise.
Right, no, it's supposed to-
And we could deal with the wish list, but we're not gonna do that without chunk of time.
No, that's right.
Okay, so in light of that, then I think, we can adjourn.
Okay.
Okay, so, meeting adjourned.
Really? Yeah. I was busy chatting, I wasn't paying.
They didn't even notice. We came to consensus on, no, that's enough.
The choice was we can go on to that wish list.
Oh,
So thank you to our Zoom audience for hanging with us. Hope you could hear most of what was talked about here. If you couldn't, let me know, because we're trying.
That, the thing is online, I just got it.
Yes, yeah, Janice texted or
Put it in the chat.
mentioned in chat that it's now linked to the agenda. Okay. And Janice, you can go ahead and end the meeting.
Thanks. Night.
Good night.